Toolboxes for alphas and underdogs. Firstly, understand that tools for alphas can easily apply to the average underdog and vice versa. If you did listen to this whole audiobook, here's a reminder. Alpha traits are fluid. In addition, alphas feel like underdogs. If any of these tools don't apply to every reader, you can always preach to others. After all, you probably just read an entire book about anger and a book about weight loss, specifically because you have a fat and angry husband and you want to change him. With that being said, I've been prone to obesity and anger issues, so it's all good. Originally, this book, or audiobook rather, was being written with a completely different kind of epilogue. I thought it would be nifty to include a behind-the-scenes look at what events took place during the creation of this project. I thought that the total would be about 60,000 words, including the behind-the-scenes. However, it ended up being closer to 150,000 words. That's big enough to clobber someone with, and I didn't want to write a book that was so massive it could potentially cause physical injuries. So, now that you have been indoctrinated with my depressing gospel of the sick, status-obsessed society, I now present to you, free of charge, my Gospills, like the gospel, Gospills, of various forms of treatments to apply over various kinds of people in various situations. When I wrote the end, I had a funny feeling it wasn't exactly over, since there's been an uncanny degree of oppositional energies that have tried to hinder and influence and delay and even kill this project. I have also experienced a lot of good magic at work. Some of the most magical stuff has happened regarding this afterword epilogue appendix thing. I had a vivid dream where I was back in my childhood home, and my mother insisted on messing with an early version of this very book. I had similar things happen in real life, and finally learned just to walk away from those kinds of dominators. So that's what I did in the dream. While I was on my way out, I got inspired to extend the book after the ending, and this very specific term came to mind before I awoke. Power statements. Since I mentioned earlier about applying things like positive affirmations, I was wondering if I should have elaborated more. And this dream was a coincidence that it was a great reminder in addition to likely some good magic at work. If that wasn't enough confirmation for me to proceed, soon after awakening, I logged onto the meditation app I work with and caught about 10 minutes of a streaming event from a teacher whom I was somewhat familiar with. He was just wrapping up a meditation that ended with some affirmations, and some of them applied quite directly to what was in my dream just minutes prior. I am worthy of being seen. I allow myself to be visible, were some of the affirmations he stated, and I thought that was another wild coincidence to remind me how much good magic there has been with this project, also considering my personal transformation I experienced during its creation. Cheat sheet for alphas and underdogs. If you have gotten to know me so far, you remember how redundant I am. Partly it is because you are likely not to have an eidetic memory. And even if you remember every word in this book, you are likely to have mental blocks for various reasons. The main reason is that someone has been running around every store, switching price tags on everything, so to speak. Everyone around you seems to value worthless people just because of their power and how shiny they are, in addition to minimizing and undermining anyone valuable who is being ignored. This cultish system has brainwashed everyone, including you. Applying principles in this audiobook will likely mark you as a heretic, an apostate, and a blasphemer, but that's cool because I happen to like you a lot. This cultic and crowdsourced brainwashing could explain why you forgot everything I wrote, and that's cool. I still like you. I'm not asking you to read or listen to everything again. It's a really big fucking project, and I'm really sorry it took so long. I just have a hard time shutting up, and I'm damn proud of it. Once you learn to bark, it becomes a way of life. You make it a habit of no longer people-pleasing as a priority and as a reflex. And you start to learn to tactfully stand up for yourself within reason. At first, you might get clobbered, but for a while, as long as you keep your cool and do not freak out at people, you'll be amazed at how your leaders will start wagging their tails. And, well, they actually bark less and even bite less. Besides how you smell, your posture, your tone, and other alpha traits, I believe there's a sort of vibe to being a leader that transcends outward characteristics and even personal interaction. For instance, your online presence, if applicable, and also dating profiles, if applicable, will get noticed more and receive more activity even though those people on the other side of the world cannot hear you, touch you, or smell you. As much as there is a lot of science to this, there is also a lot of magic. Just listening to this material is enabling you to participate in some powerful energy that is available to you right now. In addition to your listening and hopefully experiencing a change of heart and mind, applying these principles, and without being a moron, is changing the way you interact with others. So, here are some things to remember. Alphas are suffering at the top with all their stress and fighting to maintain their rank while obsessed with accumulating more power in addition to the various struggles people encounter. We all know how they suffer because of their visibility, and they feel like they constantly need more validation. Underdogs are suffering at the bottom with all their stress of being abused and neglected. Most people don't see their suffering, nor are they interested because of their invisibility. Alphas have unfair advantages because their power comes so naturally to them. They mostly get the exceptions to the rules, and their mistakes are easily overlooked. Underdogs have unfair disadvantages because they have to take unnecessary risks to get what they want and even what they need. Their mistakes are held under more scrutiny, motives often judged, and there's little to no grace or conflict resolution. In addition, runts typically work extra hard to get what comes more easily for most other people. The Peephole's Court. If you are a beloved leader with adoring fans and you do something harmful, a realistic reaction will sound something like, "They mean well, they just stumbled a bit and will do better. We love them and know that, they did it for the right reason." If you are a runt of society and do something helpful, you'll likely hear something like this. Don't try to act like some kind of saint when it's obvious you're just desperate for attention. As we have learned, having status, changing status, or lacking status has really nothing to do with someone's ability or willingness to contribute to society. If you just want to be famous and do nothing but post selfies, like the ones on a tropical beach in the background, and get all the perks of social ranking, that's your choice. Although for conscience sake, I obviously do not recommend it. I have also found a strange phenomenon where there are some alpha types, or perhaps some, who have learned creepy ways to hack the system harmfully, and at the same time, they seem to possess unusual gifts. I have met several cruel abusers throughout my life who were significantly gifted. I must wonder where they not only get their personal power from, but also their talents. But that's for a different study. I have my own theories, but I'd rather not elaborate. However, I must add that we need to be aware of such people. I have laid out the rules for underrated and overrated people, and must say that there are exceptions to these concepts. For many of you underdogs, changing your status is simply a matter of increasing your quality of life, although for others it can be a matter of survival based on being stuck in harsh environments, economic turmoil, or risky chronic health conditions. Everyone suffers as a result of this ranking system, just in different ways depending on where you fit in the pecking order. You can get sore heads from being pecked by all those above you. In addition, if you happen to be above a lot of people, your pecker can also get sore if you feel like you must have to peck everyone under your authority just to get things done. The rare times I get to be a boss, I have noticed that the more I am aware of these social dynamics, the less I want to be a bossy boss. At the same time, while trying to hire somebody to help with odd jobs on my property, I've noticed that most of them start to boss me around. It's as if they are hired understanding that I am the boss, and when I do not make traditional territorial gestures to establish my position over them, it's confusing. And their only response is to assume that they are, in fact, the one who rules over me, no matter how ironic the situation is. Get off my metaphorical lawn. When I was in my mid-40s, I began a nomadic lifestyle and eventually landed in Arizona for a while. Both of these enabled me to spend more time around a lot more retired people than I have at other times throughout my life. So much of what they say is about how miserable they are. And although I agree they are considered vulnerable and at-risk demographic, many of them also possess a lot of status. In my recent experiences, the folks who have caused me the most misery in my life are the ones who have these traits. Recently retired, relatively higher functioning, and clearly alpha-type men and women who held high-profile vocational positions. They were either a successful business owner, an educator in upper management, or had a significant public image and reputation. Even if they devour self-help books on preparing for retirement, apparently none of them are ever prepared for their sudden loss of power. It's traumatic to suddenly, get laid off, fired, or like me, disabled at age 32. And that's a similar set of traits. However, retirement is quite a different monster. They're supposed to be happy. It was natural, normal, and expected to reach retirement. They expected to be relieved, but they find themselves going insane and making various people around them suffer. When a recently retired person has a spouse who is less of an alpha, those relationships can go from bad to worse. They might have to accumulate more dogs or anything that will give them the illusion of having power. If that doesn't work, they might seek out friends who will, submissive types, or sometimes open their relationship to meet any of those unmet needs, especially if those needs are not even sexual. From what I've observed, those who start out a fairly productive hobby that gives them visibility and recognition may find some relief. Some cannot stand it, and they have to start a fun business, or worse, a useless do-nothing charity organization, and handpick various subordinates to be on their board in order to get high while barking orders at everyone. Others start a deafening dad rock band, while some create a ministry. Well, they teach their end-of-the-world revelations to small, gullible country churches. If those activities do not soothe their addiction to power, I have seen them seeking out opportunities to take advantage of vulnerable people, often special needs adults or other runts of society. Sometimes it's just that their adult children have distanced themselves, and they are so desperate to find ways not only to meet their needs for their loss of their career, but also get back to the issues related to dormant empty nest syndrome that the boredom of sudden retirement can trigger. Some of these gestures can be subtle and go unnoticed by everyone, including the victim. In my experience, having the perfect storm of my traits, my location, and my vulnerabilities, and I've suffered bullying, threats, humiliation, and other alarming forms of abuse, while my community acts as if I can defend myself because I'm a big guy. My being big in size doesn't matter when I am outnumbered, outgunned, and basically defenseless against those who have more resources, more power, and often more money. It has a lot to do with my perceived privilege, because if anyone wants the upper hand with an underdog, it sadly can sometimes be provoked by those who have some sort of socially accepted card that they can play that makes them appear as if they're the ones who are more vulnerable and less privileged. I live in a nation where power addicts get appointed and even elected, who are close to 80 years of age, in addition to not possessing the lucidity to lead with sanity, clarity, compassion, and empathy, to take responsibility for the blatant suffering they cause. If someone can lead at 80, that's great, especially if they live until 100 and remain high-functioning, responsible, compassionate enough to work well enough in their position, just like any leader should, although with some extra support. It's just so hard for a powerful people to lay down their power, and they would rather hurt themselves and others just so they can continue to rule and reign until their last breath. That reminds me a lot of ancient traditions of empires and dynasties, although we must admit that our civilization is looking more like that. And this constant enabling of the abuse and addiction to power are some things that are taking us back to the Dark Ages. Two kinds of crazy. I have taught this on stage before about my two kinds of crazy discourse back when I developed my status-related rhetoric. These days I rarely use the word crazy, but it seems to fit better. It still applies to my current body of work because the addiction and the abuse of power are so relevant to social status and ranking. For those being abused by those who have too much power and suffer trauma, and causing, thus, insanity. For those at the top abusing their power, it causes a different type of insanity that resembles delusion, and just about all the character traits that resemble substance abuse. If there's any trauma at the top, it's the constant feeling of insecurity where they feel unsafe and alone at the top because they no longer trust anyone, are afraid of everyone, is out to take their power away, and is scared that those under them will instigate some kind of revolt against them. And the next time I go to Africa, I'll take you to a troop of baboons, and you'll see how miserable they are. And it's not because they don't have access to streaming media. Likely, they have lived in that same spot for hundreds of thousands of years and passing down the same generational trauma, in addition to enabling various states of personal trauma and fears of losing ranking. The further you are at the top, everyone under you wants to take your position. The further you are at the bottom, the more everyone needs you to, relieve their stress on you by more abuse and unfair treatment, and thus take away what little power you may or may not even have, keeping you in a place of little to nothing or in a state of constant debt and lack. The two kinds of crazy are simply these: crazy with power and crazy without power. A better way to put this is crazy with too much power or crazy with not enough power. One of the many symptoms of a sick society is lack of the middle class. I lived in the Russian Federation just long enough to know what that world is like, in addition to traveling through what some still recently refer to as third world countries. I see my country as slowly turning into this second and maybe even growing traits of a third world nation. The attention economy and other social ills are slowly becoming more polarizing to the point where there will be a society of people who are either entirely ignored or impossible to ignore. There will be two extremes and nothing moderate in the middle. You might find yourself at a party and notice that 10% of the people are getting 100% of the attention, for example. Media outlets and social media platforms are rigged to create systems like that, although pretending not to. Leaders are doing it. Followers are enabling it. Any form of artificial intelligence, because of who programs them, is also creating these same patterns. Everything is fixed in order to polarize the haves and the have-nots of the attention economy to take their rightful places in our beloved society and fulfill their destinies. Admonishments for alphas. If you are a confirmed alpha type and you are skipping ahead to the end of this book, I don't blame you. Those 90,000 plus words would have likely caused you to cut yourself. If you did get through all of the material as a bona fide born leader without ending up in a rubber room, I'd like to know how you did that. But then again, alphas feel like underdogs, and because status is fluid, likely you have endured enough demotion from society that these words may have been just as much as a comfort to you as they were an extended verbose spanking. I think that a lot of the success stories we gather from motivational gurus are just alphas that are bad at being alphas, since power comes so naturally to alphas and power is hyper addictive, and addicts are touched by irresponsible and delusional behaviors, then it is likely there is a lot, and perhaps a majority, of alpha types that are so bad at being alphas that they keep failing as a result in that addiction and not possessing the superpower to be too big to fail. Maybe all they need is a Franklin planner. If they are somehow stuck in 1985. Otherwise, they just need to, for lack of a better term, grow up and get organized and read some of those dreadful get-rich books, and poof, you're golden. After all, alphas really don't need to be good at anything. You'll just get attention. You're doing just about anything, even taking a leak. I knew a former pot, that's what they called it back then, a pot dealer, who worked in Los Angeles back in the late 1960s. He made so much money that he'd throw away his underwear instead of doing laundry. He'd hang out in fancy restaurants and schmooze with the stars. One time he was standing at the urinals next to Ed McMahon and said sheepishly, "Wow, man, I'd bet it'd be really cool to be Ed McMahon. Not tonight, son, replied McMahon, zipping his trousers. Not tonight. He was even famous while peeing, in addition to being quotable while peeing. That's fame. That's power. Hopefully Ed's evening improved that night. One thing is for certain. Any other dude taking a leak would have not been notable, although there are a few exceptions I choose not to elaborate about. Alphas that fail can imitate other alphas and get results. Alphas from underdog communities have to work harder, sometimes extra hard, based on stigma and other limitations. But it is, compared to the runts of society, that they might have it, quote, easy, end quote. Besides overcoming being a nincompoop, one of the biggest struggles of the alpha is striving for success, is other alphas, especially the bigger and more aggressive breeds. You might be the alpha Yorkie in your litter, but you work next to an asshole alpha bulldog who gets promoted instead of you. Therefore, if you are what I would consider an alpha, you have failed a lot. Take 2 books and call me in the morning. You'll be okay. But what about humanity? What about guilt? What about compassion, empathy, and other adult stuff that leaders don't need to possess to shine as a pillar of success? Being an alpha-born leader doesn't mean you have to be a tyrant, but it sure can be fun. If you have a creative career, you can cleanse your soul of greed and channel authentic creative energy, and even create new breakthrough ideas without stealing them from the underdogs. Just as power comes easily to you, the alpha, pure creative energy does not, even if attainable at all, unless you happen to be good at threading a needle with a full-sized camel. Well, see Jesus for more info. Tell him I sent you. What happens after you get rich and famous? Do you just sit in your pool with your micro beers and your micro smokes and your micro whatever the thing is? Hoarding money and stuff, even micro things, is one thing that we like to scoff at. But I'm more concerned with this thing, hoarding power. There's a quote from, of course, Lord of the Rings. This is Gandalf talking to Saruman. There is only one Lord of the Ring, only one who can bend to his will, and he does not share power. Those who do not share power, at least according to J.R.R. Tolkien, are like really big bad villain in a high tower looking down at everyone. That's a miserable existence. And at the same time, that power is an elixir. As we know, it's never enough, though, and like too much money, it never satisfies. Yeah, whatever. But how does that apply practically, unless you are a fiery, supernatural dark lord type thing? Not so cold turkey. Overeating is often cured by spiritual stuff like positive affirmations. Since drugs and alcohol are not necessary like food is, there's an element of also ridding your house of those things in addition to other recovery-based stuff. Over-hoarding and, money and power are both addictions like food addictions. We need money to buy food, and we need food to live, and we need power to get the money, to get the food, and eat the food. Therefore, power and money are good things we need, like food, and just as long as they're not in excess, like food, and thus like food addiction, it can be a tough habit to break. However, compared to food addiction, power addiction is something I have never seen anyone cured of. It's like trying to get a narcissist to be cured of narcissism when that very disorder prevents that level of change and self-awareness. So, what did Jesus tell you about the whole eye of the needle discourse? It seems impossible from that perspective, but look deeper. Historically speaking, the eye of the needle is a term used for those little doorways that they used to have in ancient places like Jerusalem around that time. A big camel had to duck down enough to clear that short clearance, but all of them must unload all the stuff they might have packed on their humps, whatever number of humps that camel had. Therefore, being rich really isn't that bad as long as you are willing to let it go. Those who possess enough power, money will return to them soon, so no worries. However, letting go of power is something I have found in my personal experience of hanging around a lot of powerful people, yet to be significantly relinquished, although many of them want to function in deep levels of compassion and creativity. My power has been taken from me a handful of times in my life, and I have survived. I have not had much over the years, and when I was younger, the little I had at times, I did feel high on it and even abuse it. Lately, as I learn these principles, every time I get visibility, my current instinct is to find someone invisible and share what power I have. I didn't think that way when I was younger because I had no idea how privileged I was. I assumed everyone could just flip a switch and be powerful. I am not glad I lost my power. It has made me suffer for way too long and caused me to be at risk in way too many ways. At the same time, for the sake of discovering these principles and for the sake of restoring my creative energy and ability to sincerely empathize with the lowly and hurting, I am also glad I lost my power because it gave me the ability to see and feel things I would have not been able to do. It's a part of a little thing I call humanity. I'm not asking anyone to lay down all of their power unless they really don't need it, or they don't need it anymore for some reason. The closest thing for a power-hungry person to do at this point is begin to learn how to share their power. With some people, some situations, and some kinds of addictions, going cold turkey might be an acceptable method, but tapering off anything that someone was dependent on is typically the healthier course of action. One of my dependency issues was religion. I spent nearly 8 years weaning myself off of it. In addition to lifestyle changes, speaking positive words over yourself is a great way to begin your recovery and find your road to humanity. Let us apply some power statements for our beloved leaders who happen to be listening to this particular part. Power affirmations for alpha types. I feel satisfied by my gain, and as long as I'm sharing what I gain in all fairness. I am defined by my character and contributions to the world, not my assets and my power. I let go of my need to accumulate power. I accept myself as if I had no money, no things, and no relationships. I forgive myself and cleanse my conscience of anything I have done, am doing and am planning on doing that abuses my power. I allow myself to look deeply into the lives of those less powerful with compassion, empathy, fairness, equality, and understanding. I love people and use things. I don't love things and use people. I am courageously unafraid to lose my money, my things, my relationships, and my power. I allow others to get in the spotlight without jealousy, anger, fear, or resentment. I speak up for the weak and powerless. I empower those who need power with tangible and significant endeavors, even if it feels like it could threaten my power. I allow myself to risk my reputation while speaking out for those who are silenced. I create opportunities to empower the powerless, whether I do it in secret or not. I am a voice to the voiceless and a face to the invisible. I freely provide validation, recognition, acknowledgement, and consideration to those society has thrown away. I am not afraid of those who have been banished and alienated. I see those who are unseen, and I hear those who are unheard. I don't need to be seen. I don't give what I throw away. I don't give to suit my will. I give to those who need it, when they need it, and exactly what they need. I give enough and not too much. I give my power. I share my power. I am aware of my status. I realize and embrace my status without denial. I am grateful for my status. I am responsible for my status and thus reject all guilt related to my power. I am grateful for my inherent privileges and take responsibility for my influence, authority, leadership, ranking, and status. I rejoice in the positive differences I can make in the lives of those who need and deserve that power that I can provide for them.